I feel clean-shaved naked after that, that beardy band is up here. Now, I realize it wasn't a requirement, clearly, to have a beard, but, and the youngest video technician that I've ever seen at work, so way to go, way to share your gifts like that. That's fantastic. I love that. Hey, how am I sound-wise? Is that okay for everyone? That seems good? Good. Hey, I'd rather be out with the boys this morning. Honestly, I love the hike in the woods. I love that. I was out for first wiener roast last night, jumping the gun, getting started early. Anyone else been out to cook dogs or anything yet? Have blazing? Oh yeah, you've been at it for a while already. So, and today, 61 and sunny, and Palm Sunday coming up, and Easter down the road. Little life in our veins, that's going to be great. But friends, we're not there yet. We're actually in the season of Lent. And in different places, that means different things. And so I was feeling out a little bit, what have been the Lent practices, how attentive have we been to it. And it doesn't matter what you've done, where you've been, but that's the season that runs about 40 days, and it runs from Ash Wednesday up to Holy Week, and sometimes people kind of think it ends at different points in Holy Week. But so here we are in the middle of Lent, and Lent is traditionally a time of repentance and self-denial. But our consumer culture doesn't much like that idea of self-denial, right? So a lot of churches, instead of practicing self-denial and setting things off, they add new and additional things, sometimes to the point of overflowing, to our kind of spiritual discipline repertoire. Hey, and it doesn't really matter, because the life of pursuing Christ-likeness, involves both, okay, you ready for this? These are your first theological terms for today. Mortification and vivification. Mortification, putting certain things to death in our life. The old nature, the sin nature, setting them aside, self-denial. So Lent has traditionally focused on that work. In our culture, we don't much like to be told no, and so lots of times our church kind of plays along, so we just say more yes. Well, that's not all bad. Yes, there's more yes, the life of vivification. And both, though, however, take this. Both, however, are accomplished with discipline, prayer, and practice. Now, sure, the Holy Spirit can gift an amazing vivification and bring new things to life kind of miraculously in our lives, but most of Christian life takes a little work, takes a little stick-to-itiveness. Got to keep your eye on the ball for a while, got to get a little accountability partner and help from others. So, I want us to think about that a little bit today, because Lent is also designed to help us to escape from bondage. The Israelites, and you know the old story, the Israelites followed Moses out of bondage in Egypt, and then they followed the Shekinah glory of God that was a pillar of smoke by day and a pillar of fire by night across the Red Sea and through the wilderness, right? As they escaped from bondage. And we're not in bondage, we're not making bricks for Pharaoh, but we've all been in bondage to sin. And friends, we're still in bondage to sin. Not that we haven't been set free, but we're still being set free. And this is the life of sanctification, little by little, more and more as we pursue Jesus to become like Him. We are to be lifelong changing. A lifelong pursuit of faithfulness. To so many Christians, they come to faith. There's some vitality, whether it's in the early years or in the college years, but then they end up spiritually flatlining through the 30s and through their 40s, and they wonder, is this all there is? And I hope that not many of you are experiencing that you've been resuscitated, but that often happens in the church. You get the big shrug. It's like, it's been the same this year as it was last and the year before. What could possibly be new? Friends, I think we're captives. We're captives of a different sort. Not to the Pharaoh, but to the patterns of the world. That's the way Paul describes it in Romans 12:1 and 2. We're captive to the patterns of the world. We're captive to patterns of our culture, to late modern worldview that shapes our wants and our hopes and our fears. And Lent should help us to contend with the idols of our time. Consumerism and nationalism and hedonism, and we could go on to explore the ways that our own cultural bondage holds us down and what the freedom of the gospel invites us to. There's one idol that holds us that we often let off the hook, even though Jesus did not. And it's the idol that is so near and so dear to us. It's the self. So here's a New Testament lesson, Mark 8, verses 34 and 35, and this is one of those texts. This is the, "Oh, Jesus, how could you? What are you thinking?" And so you can see the text here from Mark chapter 8, and this is a hard, hard word from Jesus. And calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it." Now that is not what we really want to hear, is it? That's a hard word. And I imagine the disciples felt the same way, but the disciples had this advantage. They already had a good head start on us. They had already left almost everything to follow Jesus. They had kind of been practicing some of what he's asking them to do yet further still. Deny self. Sacrifice self. To live in selfless love. Now, I've got to tell you guys that our language reveals something about the dynamics, the nature of the self, that we're deeply conflicted about the self. So if I had a big whiteboard, I would chart your answers to this little game, the self-blank game. So I think we got that on the slide. No, it's not going to come up there either. Yeah, there it is, the self-blank game. So just think with me and go ahead and shout a couple out. If you're just going to fill in any word, what goes here? Self what? Self-image, yep. Self-doubt, self-righteousness, self-actualized, selfish, I think someone said, self-love, yeah. Okay, so get this, and here's where I want to go with this. We might discover that in our culture, we place a lot of confidence in the self, and that we think pretty highly of the self. We talk approvingly of self-esteem, self-confidence, self-determination. We admire self-starters that are self-directed and that self-actualize, and we may even praise the self-made man and the self-made woman, right? There's a strong sense of self, a get-her-done self, a go-to the self to solve your problem self, right? But then we also use the word with some scorn. Scorn for the self-righteous, the self-absorbed, self-centered, self-advancing, and just the plain old selfish. I've got no beef with yet another self-help book or a DIY, a do-it-yourself project. But the truth is, when it comes to your heart and your character, your soul, you cannot save yourself. And the self is not a DIY project. You need someone beyond the self to save the self. And we'll need a lot of help if we're going to deny the self. Because the self is feisty, and it's self-protective, and it doesn't like to be denied. I want to describe something that I hope that you've actually never seen a real one of these, but perhaps you've seen it in a movie thriller, To Restrain Hannibal Lecter. And this is a straitjacket. It's a canvas wrap that was used to constrain those who threatened harm to themselves or to others. And a straitjacket is a grim fashion statement. Arms lashed and then tied securely behind. Or perhaps you remember, this would date you a little bit if you remember the great Houdini, but anyone who comes after the great Houdini had to do what? The escape artists had to be bound in a straitjacket, nailed into a box, thrown into a vat of water, and to escape the triple bind, right? But I want to ask you this. Are you ready to consider with me here for a few minutes this problem child, the self? That it may be in various ways distorted. Are you ready to wrestle with this burrito wrap of sin? Because sin works this way. It straps us. And then it boxes us up. And it makes us smaller. There's a quote by Billy Graham, and it isn't about a straitjacket, but I can't help but picture a straitjacket whenever I hear this. And he wrote this, and he often said it. The smallest package I ever saw was a man wrapped up wholly in himself. So first, I want to take a dive into an Old Testament reading. This is from Isaiah 58. And I've got on the overhead just two verses from this, verses 6 and 7, but I'm going to read 1 to 12. And so I'll signal you when we get to 6 and 7 here so that you can read along. But I want you to notice something in this text as I read, in Isaiah 58 here. In these opening verses, Isaiah is being asked by the Lord to sound a trumpet. Okay? Sound a trumpet in order to call attention to the grievous sins of Israel. The people are showcasing righteousness to one another and to God. They cry out, "Lord, take notice. I'm performing for you." And the Lord responds, "What a lot of hot air. Get humble, showman. Bow low and mourn. Deny the self." And then verses 6 and 7. And then a glorious ending with a promise of a coming. If only we could learn selfless love, the promise of a kingdom to come. So here I go. Isaiah 58, "Cry aloud, do not hold back, lift up your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their transgression, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that did righteousness and did not forsake the judgment of their God." So they're crying out, but not out of a whole heart. They did not forsake, or they did not attend to the righteousness. They ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near. Why have we fasted and you see it not? Why have we humbled ourselves and you take no acknowledgement of it? Behold, in the day of your fast, you actually seek your own pleasure and oppress all your workers. Behold, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to hit with the wicked fist. Fasting like yours this day will not make your voice to be heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose? A day for a person to humble himself. Is it to bow down his head like a reed and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Now, friends, it sounds to me like it's bending in the right direction a little bit. The Lord says, no, not yet. Quite potentially still more showcasing, still more performing. Look at how I fast. Look at how I'm engaging in these worship acts. And the Lord wants to go deeper still. Is not, verses 6 and 7, is not this the fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of wickedness and to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? And when you see the naked, to cover them up, and not to hide yourself, not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. And then verse 8 begins this turn now. If only we could really live out the selfless love, selfless engagement. Then shall your light break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up speedily. Your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, here I am. If you take away the yoke from your midst, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of wickedness, if you pour yourself out for the hungry and satisfy the desire of the afflicted, then shall your light rise in the darkness and your gloom be as noonday. And the Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your desire in scorched places and make your bones strong. And you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water, whose waters do not fail, and your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairers of the wall, the restorer of streets to dwell in. And friends, this isn't like a strange text in the Bible where God is He's not overwhelmed by the worship of his people. Because sometimes the worship of his people ends right there. And it doesn't spill forth and pour out and shape the love of neighbor that we hear over and over again in this text. Right? This is a hard, like the Mark 8 text, this is a hard text. We saw in verses 6 and 7 there, relieve the suffering of others. That's righteousness. Feed the hungry and invite the homeless into your home. Clothe the naked with your own clothes. Self-giving love is what the Lord wants to see. And that is true religion. And that is true worship. And then those images of the kingdom of God begin to pour out. The glory of the kingdom will begin to beam, verse 10, if you pour yourself out for the hungry and afflicted. Then kingdom blooming, something that is radiant and lush. It's glorious. And the Lord will say, I'm here. So Isaiah is decrying this sin. Self-interested and self-designed religion. In this text, we see that selfless love is the first step toward the kingdom. Love brings light. Now, that was Israel's problem a long time ago, and a very religious culture, right? They warped religion. They were using it to self-soothe and self-promote. They were wrapped in sin. Now I'm not going to talk about all three of these books that I put up here, but I want to talk about this one on the far right, Dietrich Bonhoeffer's classic, The Cost of Discipleship. This is one of the most challenging books I ever read in my life, not because it is the fattest or the most theoretical or the most, it's simply this, it's the truest. It's the one that I think hit me harder than any other book because it is about our passage from Mark 8. The whole book unpacks that passage, and in it Bonhoeffer seems to see the church of his day, and remember Bonhoeffer was a German at the rise of Nazis, at the rise of the brown shirts in Germany, and he's contending, and he'll later contend with Hitler and lose his life for it. But he is contending with the church of his day. He's a prophet trumpeting the sins of his own people, And he argues in the book that the church is satisfied with something he calls cheap grace. A kind of a simplified gospel. A watered down gospel that doesn't really require much, doesn't ask for much. A grace that doesn't transform. He argues that the church is satisfied with a little bit of the gospel so that we can be comfortable, so that we can continue on much as we've been, and which is exactly what was happening in Germany. Go to church and worship and let the engines all around you keep on chugging away toward death. And we could unpack this sin, because it's no doubt one that is still with us, cheap grace. But our time is a little different context still. Just as the Isaiah to Israel was, and Bonhoeffer in his day in Germany was. If we were to take a look at our own day, how does our own day inflate the self and mask us to see the power of the self in our lives and what it's keeping us from? Right? And if the self in our consumer culture, what's it here all the time? The self is, every ad is pitched to the self. The self can't be satisfied with the self, not that old you that you see in the mirror. How could you be? Unless your skin is more youthful, right? Your hair full and bushy. Yes, I see it too. Teeth straight and white. Then I'd be content, even happy. If I had the nicest house on the block and one at the beach, sure, I'd be happy then. And a car that matched my savage ego. And it creeps even into my world, the higher ed world, my domain. It's changed the purpose of the entire curriculum and co-curriculum. Education is now, and everyone who's coaching their own kids buys into this too. What's education for? Education is for upward mobility. It's to climb the staircase of success. It's so you can live in the nicer home, make more money, right? We view education that way. It's self-promotion, self-advancement. It's about success, not for wisdom, not for citizenship, not for service. The idols sink in deep. Okay, one other of those books, and this one's the one that was in the middle. This is by a favorite Catholic author, Brian Mahone. And this is one of my very favorite books on calling. Just listen to the title of it. It speaks volumes. It's called Forgetting Ourselves on Purpose: Vocation and the Ethics of Ambition. And he's going to argue this, that in our culture, we've unleashed the ethics of ambition. All right? And that is a self-aggrandizing, a self-soothing, self-advancing kind of a... But he says the biblical idea of vocation is something quite different. It's not about the protection and advancing of the self, that the calls of the Bible are calls to selflessness, to care for the poor and the disenfranchised, to giving your life away, forgetting ourselves on purpose. In this book, Mahone has these two little phrases that I love that just echo in my brain. He says, hey, we've all heard it. We've all received these, he calls them epiphanies of recruitment. Most of us don't, even if we say that, the Lord told me, we don't actually hear an audible voci Dei, most of us, we don't. I believe in a Lord who has spoken and who can speak, but for most of us, it comes with nudges, with inclinations, right? And I think that's what Mahone means by epiphanies of recruitment. Every once in a while, we get a deep sense of what the really right, what the really good thing to do is, and it's usually a hard thing. It's usually a selfless thing. And so he says most of us hear these epiphanies of recruitment, but then unfortunately, we're also mentored to mediocrity. And we're mentored to mediocrity even by the people who love us the most. And mentored to mediocrity means this: I have a little sense of what a fuller, deeper, richer life, a path of sacrifice might look like, but then we're told, oh, don't carry it all on your shoulders. No, you got to plan ahead. You got to save up for the future. You got to be secure. You got to save a little coin so you can have that, that home of your own, 2 cars in the garage, retirement package, right? We do this to the ones that we love most. We squelch the call to self-sacrifice because we don't like what Jesus said in Mark chapter 8. We don't like it for ourselves, and we don't want it for our kids. Because we can't believe that it's the path to the kingdom. How can it be? Seems too bleak, too hard. Jesus is calling, and it's more than an epiphany of recruitment. And he isn't much interested in mediocrity. Here in Mark 8, it's a call to radical discipleship. Give up self-obsession and self-protection. Don't think self first. Deny the self. Most of us know this, that too much self is a lonely place. All right? So in the wisdom that we've been taught, we have a little sense that to go way overboard in being self-absorbed is lonely and deadly. But then we back off that a little bit, but we don't back off as far as where Jesus is calling us to self-denial, because that seems too hard. Take up your cross. And Jesus is saying this, of course, before he goes to the cross. He's saying, hey, persecution is, for you guys, for you disciples, it's for sure. Don't be dismayed. Brave and steady. Come what may. The self must be sacrificed so that love can be freed to work. It's like Jesus is saying a little death comes before a lot of life. Trust me in this. Follow me in this. I'm going to show you the way. Follow me not just in a stroll down easy street. It's going to be like four-wheeling over rough terrain. The way of Jesus is the way of sacrificial love. And when we actually walk in it, we discover that it's also the way of deep meaning and joy. The selfish way leads nowhere, not even to happiness. The rugged way, the way of the rugged cross, that leads to abundant life. Hey, and just so you don't imagine that, hey, maybe Jesus gets badly interpreted here in Mark 8, or this is at one place where he goes too far or something. I just put up two texts here, one from Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4 about selfish ambition, and another from James, chapter 4:10, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and he will lift you up. Just to show there is, and much more beyond these, consistent biblical testimony that this is the biblical picture. It's a picture of a radical gospel. A gospel that is the outpouring of free grace, but not cheap grace. A grace that enters in and unbinds us from the straitjacket of self to free us to selfless love. So yeah, idols are deadly. Psalm 115 reminds us that those who make them and worship them will become like them, namely dead. But idols are also sneaky. They don't often glisten like a golden calf. The self isn't always on bold display like it was in last week's Grammys. Don't get me started, all right? And that's just one place. We actually see the promotion of self all the time in our culture in all kinds of ways. And actually, we like it when we see the extreme examples because that allows us to feel a little self-righteous, right? A little like, oh, at least I'm not that, I haven't gone that far off the rails. But yeah, our culture is, it's all about selling, promoting the self. It's a selfie culture. We want to be the one that shows how cool we are and what a good time we're having all the time. Right? Hey, man, there's a little more analysis, a little culture analysis that if I had more time, I'd love to do together with you guys. Because lots of our social analysts are saying this, that we're living in an age of expressive individualism. Our notion of self has been evolving and changing for a long time, over many generations, but our children will hear these messages And you know this. They'll hear these messages 10,000 times by the time they're young adults. Listen to this. Follow your passion. Chart your own course. Be yourself. March to the beat of your own drummer. Follow your dreams and find yourself. This is the litany of expressive individualism. You be you. And this is not the way of a disciple. A disciple follows the leader, follows the rabbi. Oh, friends, there's more work we could do here. Unselfing is never a how-to project. We've been unselfed by the gospel, by the true gospel. We've been set free from the bondage to self, but if we return to that bondage, the evil one is happy to wrap us up and bound us tight so that we can be ineffective, so that we may flatline for 20, 30, 40 years, wondering what the big deal is all about. Questioning whether something like sanctification can actually even take place. Can I actually become more like the living Lord Jesus all my life long? Hard to do in a culture like ours. When the self gets us tangled and tied, the adventure is over. We're stuck in low gear. Lent can become a step in the right direction. It was designed to help us to squelch the needy, greedy self, to actually become a conduit of the love of God. Because we were made for that in the first place, right? We were created, we were made, and we're all, you know that Fisher-Price little donut stacking toy? That's my best picture of what it means to be created in the image of God. We're made like that. Multiple gifts of different colors, that you can see. But all of us, right down the middle, love cord, made this way to love the Lord our God with all of our heart and soul and mind and strength, and our neighbors as ourselves. With whatever gifts, whatever colors, all the variety and richness that we've been given, we're made to be love cord. And isn't that what Jesus is calling us back to? How do we get back to less fascination and fixation with ourselves and to become what we were originally made and created to be? Selfless lovers of God and neighbor with everything we've got. Hey, please join me with in this prayer. Lord, we do not want to be trapped by the self-satisfying religiosity decried by Isaiah. We heard that. We don't want to be trapped by the cheap grace that Bonhoeffer saw in his church, nor by our consumer culture's coddling of the self. We want to follow Jesus, even through self-denial and self-sacrifice, to live in love. God's love for us and in us and then through us, to the oppressed and hungry and naked, to aliens and orphans and widows, to the lost and lonely and those languishing in grief, to those near to us and to neighbors and to those others who are quite different than we are. We thank you for reconciling us in love and for calling us into the ministry of reconciliation. Now nurture us, please, Lord, your flock in the fold, and train us not to be pen-bound, but to bound beyond the pen and the familiar trails to share love, to carry the good news, the gospel of the kingdom, to carry it across the street, across rivers, across mountains, until everyone receives the invitation to the feast. Unself us for the gospel of the kingdom of Jesus Christ. And prepare our hearts this day and this week for your triumphal entry come Palm Sunday. And as we encounter once more the glory of your rising, may you become for us the fount of everlasting love. Glory to Christ and to his kingdom. Alleluia and amen.